Hi guys, it's Daniel from Studio Wildlife. I was recently contacted by a new art company called ARTEZA, some of you may have heard of them, and they basically asked me if I wanted to try out and review some of their products. And of course I said yes, because who doesn't like getting free things? They've sent me this pack of 60 acrylic colours, because that's what I primarily work in, acrylics, and I thought I would film what I thought about them. See all of the colours included in the box right there, and for me, I find it a massive faff mixing colours, so having these colours available makes it a big advantage for the way that I work.
So ARTEZA sent me this pack of 6 canvases. At first glance, they look pretty good. I took them out of the packaging and gave them a little tap to see how tight they were. They seem pretty well stretched. And quite good quality, nice finish to them. They look quite thick, so quite strong canvases. And when I measured them, they looked pretty square. They were supposed to be 30 by 40 centimetres. It turned out to be about 40.2 centimetres and 30.1 centimetres, but it was equal on all 4 sides. So the canvas was pretty square, so it was pretty well made. Honestly, when I first opened the parcel with the paints, I was pretty blown away. The actual packaging that the paints come in is so sleek. It does look really, really cool. As I mentioned before, the sheer amount of colours in this box is absolutely fantastic. It's something that might be an advantage for those of you that don't really like mixing paint colours. I know personally for me, I can spend over an hour sometimes mixing colours before I even get started with the actual painting. So having all these colours to hand really speeds up that process. Recently, I've been experimenting with some pastel drawings. I'll put a few up so you can see what I've made. This is one of my dog Charlie. Um, I plan to use these ARTEZA paints in a very, very similar way to how I use my pastel pencils. I use the pastels a little bit differently to the way that I usually paint with acrylics. Obviously, with pastels, you don't really have the option to mix your colours, so the whole process is a little bit quicker for me when I use pastels than I do when using paints. Usually, in my painting, I work by blocking in the whole thing and then working in layers, building up colour, building up tone, building up contrast and details across the whole canvas in one go. Whereas when I use pastels, I try to work on a small section at a time and build up those regions completely before moving on to the next section. So this is a quick little example of what I mean. With the drawing of my dog, I started with the eyes and the nose and then built up the regions of fur in small sections rather than blocking in base colours right at the start. I wanted to try this method out with the ARTEZA paints. They're working in small sections rather than the whole painting in one go. I'll put a link in the description to the ARTEZA website so that you can see exactly what paints I'm using. I've been really into wolves at the minute, so I decided to create a painted version of the charcoal drawing I did last week. I'll put a link to that video in the description as well. To start this painting, I wanted to use very, very small amounts of paint. I ended up using about 20 of the 60 colours available, and I'll list exactly which colours I used in the description as well. My goal for this painting was to try and use the paint straight out of the tube. I don't ever recommend doing this. If you are just starting out, it's much better to be able to match colours and learn to mix them yourself rather than using paint straight out of the tube. And this is still something that I'm trying to master, I'm still learning how to do. The first thing I noticed about the ARTEZA paints is that they're very highly saturated. So if you are looking to paint something really bright and really colourful, they are going to be a fantastic choice. Unfortunately for me, what I wanted to do was create something a little bit more realistic, which means my plan of using the colours straight out of the tube went completely out the window. I had to use some of the greys that are in the box to desaturate some of the colours, to remove some of that brightness. Other than that, the colours were pretty good. There was a little disparity with the colour that was on the tube and the actual colour of the paint once it dried, and they didn't match exactly, but that doesn't really bother me too much. Something to fix that, or a little workaround for that, is to just paint a little bit of the paint on top of each tube so that you know exactly what that paint looks like and how it's going to dry. So when you are choosing your colours, it's a little bit quicker, it's a little bit easier to do. As I got into the painting process, what I did tend to notice was the paint goes a little bit darker when it's dry, then it starts out a bit lighter when it's wet. But that tends to happen with any acrylic paint, so it wasn't unexpected for myself. And I tend to naturally account for this when I'm painting now anyway. The paints themselves were a medium consistency. They weren't the most buttery paints I've ever had, but they weren't the runniest either. And the pigment content in them was quite high, which means I didn't really need to use many layers to build up the colours that I wanted. One thing that I did notice that I wasn't too keen on was how quickly the paint on my palette was drying. After about 3 hours of painting, the colours had gone tacky, they got a little bit of a skin on them, and I had to break that skin to get to that wet paint inside. I was painting in a hot room, and I was using much smaller quantities of paint than I'm used to, but it did still seem like a bit of a short drying out time compared to other acrylic paint brands that I've used. But again, this isn't a massive problem. A simple workaround for that is to just invest in one of the Stay Wet palettes, spray the paint with a fine mist every 30 minutes or so, or use an acrylic flow enhancer to keep that paint wet for longer. Overall, there's nothing wrong with these paints. These paints are really good, and I will definitely be using them again in my work. The minor little things like the drying time and the saturation of the paints is easily adjusted when you're painting and can actually be advantageous for some artworks, especially if you're needing lots of layers and bright saturated colours. This wolf might actually be one of my favourite paintings that I've ever done. One of the reasons I think it's been so successful is because of the wide variety of colours that I had to choose from. And that box of 60 colours from ARTEZA made that colour matching process incredibly easy. I have another video describing my entire process for painting the wolf. If you want to watch it, I will add the link to the video in the description below. Let me know in the comments if you used ARTEZA paints and if you have any advice or any other tips on how to use them that you can share with me and the other viewers. And if you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to learn a little bit more about wildlife art, painting and drawing animals, please give the video a like and subscribe to Studio Wildlife. You can also find more tips over our website, www.studiowildlife.com, and you can find more of my work on Instagram, so be sure to check that out. I'll put a link down below to that as well. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate it, and we hope to make more content that helps you with your wildlife art.